So you've got your notes sheet in front of you for conservation. We're going to go through some notes and then you're going to complete an activity to work with this concept a little more. Alright, so on the top you're going to create a timeline as I go through it slide by slide. This timeline is going to show how we've used energy from right when America started all the way to now and how that has changed over time. So how we've used different energy resources to provide energy for our daily activities, okay? So let's start with pre-1700s, right? So the only way that we could really get heat and make food was from burning wood. So wood was our biggest energy resource. We would burn the wood to get energy for the different things that we needed to do. We didn't have electricity, we didn't have much else going on. So the biggest way that we would get our energy was from burning wood. So you're going to start a little timeline and you're going to write pre-1700s, and burning wood was how we got our energy. Okay. So the 1700s and 1800s, it was more like in the mid-1800s that this happened. With the Industrial Revolution and factories being created, we were finally developing a little more and we were needing more energy. So to get that energy, we started using coal. So what we would do is take these chunks of coal, and in a coal factory we would burn the coal to produce steam. Okay, and the steam would create electricity. Okay, so this is when we started using coal for electricity. So the biggest part with coal, the part that kind of developed first, was the steam engine for railroads. So to make a train run, they used coal in a steam engine to make the train go. Okay, so that was sort of the beginning of the use of coal, and then we used it for factories and for electricity from then on. Okay, so this was when we really started using that non-renewable resource of coal. Okay, so in the 1800s, you're going to just write that we continued to burn coal, so we were using it for not just railroads, but also for ships and to power ships across the ocean. So for a lot of travel, we were using coal. Okay, so then in the 1900s with automobiles, we also used gasoline. So this is when we started using gasoline for cars, and we started using that a lot more as more and more people could buy cars and could afford cars. So in the 1900s, with cars coming along, we did start using gasoline and oil. Okay, so as you can tell, the main source of energy in the US was coal. Okay, all the way up to 1950 and around the 1950s, we were using coal a lot to power our lives, especially for electricity. Okay, we were also using oil and natural gas for different parts of our lives, especially with automobiles, but mostly we were using coal for electricity. Okay, so we did not use a lot of those renewable resources that you learned about this week. We didn't have solar panels. We didn't use hydropower too much. We didn't use geothermal energy. We didn't use these resources. We just focused on these things that were easy to find that we had already developed, like coal. Okay? So you're going to fill out these charts. You've got two circles. You're going to make two pie charts to show the difference between our energy resources in 1950 and our energy resources today. Okay, so you're going to start on the left, and you're going to start in 1950. So you're going to create your pie chart to look just like this one. Okay, so you're going to draw 73% of the pie chart is coal. So in 1950, we got our energy mostly from coal, right? 73% of our energy came from burning coal. Over here we have oil. So we were using oil, so 21% of our energy came from oil. We used 5% of our energy from natural gas, and we did start developing hydropower, so using moving water to create energy, but only 1% of our energy came from hydropower. So you can see natural gas, oil, and coal are all non-renewable resources, and in 1950 we were only pretty much using those resources. So you're going to draw that out, so you feel free to pause the video to make sure you've got that drawn out really accurately. Okay, Next, you're going to draw the 2010 pie chart. So this is as recent, kind of recent. I mean, it's 5 years ago, so it's probably actually a little bit different today. But let's start with coal. Down here you've got coal. Only 21% of our energy today comes from coal, from burning coal. 37% comes from oil, so we have been using oil more. 25% is coming from natural gas. And then over here we've got all our non-renewable resources. So 3% of our energy comes from hydropower. 9% comes from nuclear power plants and nuclear energy. 4% comes from biomass and biofuel. And then only 1%, which is a little surprising still, comes from the use of geothermal, solar, and wind energy. Okay, so that is one area that we could definitely still develop, and it's an area that gets a lot of media and a lot of press, but it's actually not as heavily used as people think it is. Okay, so we still are using mostly non-renewable resources, but we have improved with our use of renewable resources. Okay, so again, feel free to pause this video to make sure you got that whole pie chart filled out. Okay, after you've filled out the 2 pie charts, you're going to write 5 sentences on those 5 lines underneath the pie chart comparing the 2 charts. So I really want you to look at those 2 graphs and explain some differences, some similarities. You can go into detail about the types of resources and use your notes from this week and last week. But I want you to take some time, so feel free to pause this video again, to compare those 2 pie charts. So compare where we were getting our energy from in 1950 and today. Okay, so how are we powering our world? What has changed from 1950 to today? Again, feel free to pause this video to make sure you're really taking the time to compare the 2 charts. Okay, so hopefully you wrote for the comparison that we really have been using a little more of our renewable resources, and we've been trying to limit our non-renewable resource use a little bit more today compared to back then. Okay, the main reason for this is that we're running out of our non-renewable resources, and we have so many people living in our world today that we have to help with electricity and power and to help power this world, but we really are running out of our resources that we can use to do that. So in this day and age, we really need to work on something called energy conservation. So hopefully now, for probably the 100th time, you've heard the word conservation. If you break it down, you've got the word conserve in the word conservation, and conserve means to save. So with energy conservation, we're basically saving our energy resources so that we don't run out of them in the future. So you're going to write this on your notes sheet. Conserving energy means to save energy or to use it less. Okay, we're basically trying to use our resources wisely. So not only does this benefit us in terms of making sure we have enough resources for the future, but it also helps our environment. So a lot of the times with burning coal and burning these different fossil fuels, it creates a lot of pollution. So hopefully you've got that as a negative from yesterday and last week with the use of fossil fuels. I mean, the pollution that it causes is really a problem. So using more of our renewable resources is actually going to also help our environment too. Okay. So I'm going to just go through a few examples of conservation, a few simpler things. Conservation also obviously includes limiting our use of non-renewable resources and making sure we use more of our renewable resources. But these are some other daily things that you can do and that people do to help conserve energy. You're going to write this on your note sheets on those lines. So the first thing is adding insulation to walls to cut down on heat loss. So if you remember the word insulator from chemistry, an insulator is something that does not let heat or electricity pass through it. So if you add an insulator like this foam in between your walls, it helps keep the heat inside your house or keep the heat from outside from getting into your house. So it kind of just helps regulate the temperature of your home. So a lot of times they add insulation now pretty much to every house to make sure there's not that much heat loss so that you're not constantly using electricity to heat your house. So along those lines, a lot of people now kind of keep the thermostat lower in the winter so they're not using as much heat and electricity to power their homes. Okay, they'll also do the same thing in the summer. They'll keep the air conditioning a little bit warmer so that we're not constantly using air conditioning all summer long to cool our homes. So it's a little bit of a sacrifice, but in the end, first off, you're helping keep your energy bills lower, but you're also helping to conserve energy as a whole. So like I said, using air conditioning less during the summer is another idea and another thing that people do to conserve, to save energy. Okay. Simple thing like turning off the lights when you leave a room. A lot of people maybe have heard of that growing up, like turn the lights off when you're not in the room because you're wasting electricity when you're just leaving the lights on and you're not actually using them. Another thing that's more recent is buying fuel-efficient cars. So these are cars that for every gallon of gas, they can go a lot more miles. So they can get a lot of mileage per gallon of gas. So that means you don't have to use as much gas to fuel your car. You don't have to fill it up as much at the gas station. So not only are you saving yourself money, but you're also using less oil and gasoline in your lifetime, which is helping to conserve that non-renewable resource. So fuel-efficient cars are becoming there's just more of them in the world these days. The only thing with this is that they are pretty expensive, so that is one limitation with fuel-efficient cars. Taking public transportation. So instead of owning a car yourself or constantly driving and using your car and wasting that energy, if you take a bus or some other type of public transportation, you're using less energy because there's more people on that bus. Okay, and then you've all heard of reduce, recycle, reuse. So recycling things, reusing things. Reduce is just not using as much of things. Okay, these are all ideas to save and conserve energy. Okay, the last part of your notes is why is it important to conserve energy? So I'm sure you could come up with a few reasons on your own, but here are just a few ideas. So using energy is sometimes harmful to the environment, especially with the pollution and the fact that we're literally taking stuff from our world that we can't replace with non-renewable resources. So we are just running out of supply and we're just going to keep taking this supply. Okay, it also costs a lot of money, so a lot of these ideas that I've shared with you will actually make your energy bills lower and it'll keep your costs of living lower. So using so much energy is expensive, so if you can use less of it, you're going to save money. And then using too much energy can also lead to some of these issues, which you've probably heard of before, but I'm just going to go through some of them. Okay, so, the first is global warming, right? So with fossil fuels and with pollution and with the emissions of carbon dioxide, our world is slowly heating up, okay? So that can lead to a lot of different natural disasters and issues that happen when our temperature of the world is different than what it should be. Okay. Acid rain from the pollution in the air can happen, so that's when the rain literally gets polluted and it falls down and can destroy natural habitats and it's just dangerous to be around. Air pollution, like you can see in this picture, from all the fossil fuels in the air. Water pollution as well, from that pollution in the air. Okay. And just the overall harm to nature. So the world that we have today is like all that we have, and if we continue to harm it, it's just going to get worse. So with so many people living in the world today, it's just really important to think of how can we save some of these resources and make sure that our world can exist with so many people living in it for a really long time. Okay? So you're going to move on to picking an activity to do with conservation. You've got two options, so feel free to read through both and then pick one to work on.